Introduction. The Master of Alchemy found himself holding a weathered text, a volume left behind by a fellow traveller in the desert procession. As he turned the fragile pages, his eyes fell upon a familiar myth, the tragic tale of Narcissus. He was well acquainted with the ancient fable of the stunning youth who would visit the edge of a tranquil pool every single day, utterly captivated by the perfection of his own reflection. The young man's obsession with his visage was so profound that one morning, leaning too far over the water's glassy edge, he plummeted into the depths and perished. From the muddy bank where he took his final breath, a delicate blossom sprouted, forever bearing his name. However, the writer of this particular volume had woven an unexpected continuation to the classic myth. The narrative detailed how, following the youth's tragic demise, the divine spirits of the woods arrived at the water's edge, only to find that the once sweet freshwater pool had transformed into a bitter basin of salt and sorrow. The woodland spirits gently questioned the body of water, asking the cause of its profound grief, to which the pool answered that it mourned the devastating loss of the beautiful youth. The spirits nodded in understanding, acknowledging that while they had chased the young man endlessly through the trees, only the pool had been granted the rare privilege of admiring his physical perfection from such an intimate distance. To this, the water paused, seemingly puzzled, and asked if the boy had indeed been beautiful. The forest deities were taken aback by the question, pointing out that the pool, above all others, should know the absolute truth of his appearance, given that the youth had spent countless hours gazing into its surface. A profound and heavy silence settled over the water before it finally responded. The pool confessed that its tears were indeed for the lost youth, yet it had never once perceived his legendary beauty. Instead, the water mourned because whenever the boy knelt at the edge and leaned close, the pool was able to behold the reflection of its own magnificence captured deep within the youth's dark eyes. Reading this profound twist on vanity and reflection, the Master of Alchemy smiled to himself, recognizing the sheer beauty and hidden truth within the story. Chapter 1. The alchemist, standing at a distance, observed the chaotic arrival of the caravan. To him, the bustling crowds, the dust kicked up by the exhausted beasts, and the joyous shouts of the children were merely the fleeting movements of time. He had lived through countless such arrivals, and he knew that while kings and beggars traversed the sands, the desert itself remained immutable. Yet he always felt a quiet appreciation for the traveler's profound relief at witnessing the verdant miracle of the palm trees after weeks of relentless sun. However, his focus was not on the spectacle, but on the omens. The signs had clearly dictated that a man within this very caravan was destined to receive a portion of his arcane secrets. The alchemist did not yet know the stranger's face, but he trusted his practiced eye to recognize the apprentice when the moment presented itself. He mused on the necessity of transmitting this wisdom by word of mouth. It was not that the knowledge was forbidden, but rather that it was composed of pure life, a vibrant force that could not be adequately captured by the rigid confines of ink and parchment. For the young Andalusian, the sheer scale of the Al Fayoum oasis was staggering. Rather than a solitary well encircled by a few meager trees, it was a sprawling metropolis of 300 wells and 50,000 date palms, sheltering a vast array of colored tents. The silence of the desert was immediately replaced by a cacophony of life as the travelers, liberated from the constant dread of the journey, laughed and bargained with the local inhabitants. The camel driver explained that oases were sacred, neutral territories. The tribal wars raged strictly within the barren sands, leaving these sanctuaries as inviolable havens for women, children, and weary merchants. The caravan leader swiftly gathered the travelers, announcing that they would remain at the oasis until the distant tribal conflicts had ceased. Abiding by the ancient laws of hospitality and the strict rules of neutrality, he ordered everyone to surrender their weapons. To the boy's surprise, the Englishman handed over a chrome-plated revolver. When questioned, the scholar admitted that the weapon had simply helped him feel brave enough to trust in people. As the boy settled into his assigned tent, sharing space with young men of the desert, he realized that the closer he drew to the realization of his dream, the more arduous the path became. Beginner's luck had vanished, replaced by stringent tests of his persistence and faith. He understood now that he could not rush. He must move in rhythm with the omens God had placed along his route. The following morning, the Englishman, brimming with impatience, enlisted the boy's help to locate the legendary alchemist. They scoured the vast encampment, searching for the telltale signs of a burning furnace or strange apparatus, but the sheer size of the oasis rendered their efforts futile. Reluctantly, they decided they must ask for guidance. After a few disheartening encounters, a woman who fled from the strangers, and an old man who sternly warned them against seeking out witch doctors, they approached a well where a young woman was drawing water. She was not dressed in the black garb of a married woman. A veil covered her head, but her face was fully revealed. As the boy approached her to ask about the alchemist, their eyes met, and in that singular suspended moment, time seemingly halted. A profound, inexplicable force surged within him. Looking into her dark eyes, the boy instantly comprehended the most vital, resonant aspect of the universal language, the language that predated humanity and the desert itself. It was love. It required no translation, no lengthy explanation. It simply existed as absolute and undeniable as the universe. The boy knew with an unshakable certainty that he was standing before the only woman in his life. The omens he had sought in the flight of birds and the depths of crystals had led him directly to her. When she smiled, it was the confirmation of his destiny. Her name was Fatima. Over the coming weeks, as the caravan remained stalled by the distant warfare, the boy visited the well every single day. They spoke for only 15 minutes at a time, but in those brief intervals, he poured out his heart, detailing his life as a shepherd, his encounters with the old king, and the profound lessons of the crystal shop. He confessed his love for her, declaring that the war, which had initially seemed a curse, was in truth a profound blessing because it had brought him to her side. He was entirely willing to abandon his quest for the pyramids and remain at the oasis forever, content to be a shepherd once more, so long as he could be with Fatima. Yet Fatima was a woman of the desert. She listened to his tales of the soul of the world and his personal legend, and she understood the weight of his destiny. She possessed a wisdom born of the shifting sands, recognizing that true love never demanded the sacrifice of one's dreams. She told him that she, too, was a part of his dream. She urged him to continue his journey toward the pyramids when the time came, assuring him that she would wait for him just as the desert women had always waited for their men to return from the dunes. If he truly loved her, and if their bond was forged in the soul of the world, he would inevitably return. While the boy grappled with the agonizing tension between his love for Fatima and the call of his treasure, the Englishman had finally taken action. Having given up on finding the elusive alchemist through inquiries, he had constructed his own furnace outside his tent and begun the arduous process of separating sulfur. Embarking at last upon his masterwork, he confessed to the boy that it was the fear of failure that had paralyzed him for 10 years, but he was finally ready to face the fire. One evening, seeking solace from his tumultuous thoughts, the boy wandered to the fringes of the oasis. He sat upon a stone, gazing out at the vast pink horizon of the sunset, trying to reconcile his desire to stay with the imperative to continue. As he watched the sky, he noticed a pair of hawks drifting on the wind. Their seemingly random flight suddenly made a profound, terrifying kind of sense. In a flash of terrifying clarity, the boy experienced a vision. He saw a massive army, their swords drawn, riding ruthlessly into the peaceful sanctuary of the oasis. Shaken to his core, he sought out the camel driver and relayed the terrifying omen. The older man, well versed in the mysterious ways in which the soul of the world communicates, did not dismiss the boy's words as a mere mirage. He explained that while the future belonged to God, it was occasionally revealed so that it might be altered. He instructed the boy to immediately inform the tribal chieftains of the impending attack. With trepidation, the boy approached the great white tent at the center of the encampment. After hours of waiting, he was ushered into a magnificent pavilion adorned with silken cushions, golden lamps, and exquisite carpets. 8 chieftains sat in a solemn semicircle. The boy recounted his vision of the hawks and the invading army. The elders debated the matter intensely, skeptical that the desert would reveal such a crucial secret to a young stranger rather than to the generations of men who had lived and died in the oasis. Yet the eldest chieftain, a man of imposing presence, recalled the ancient tradition of Joseph of Egypt, another young stranger who had interpreted dreams and saved an entire nation from famine. The chieftain made a fateful decree. The sacred tradition of the neutral oasis would be broken. The men would be armed the following day to defend their home. However, he attached a grim condition. Arms were capricious, and if they were brought out, they must taste blood. If the sun set the next day without an enemy appearing, the boy would be executed for his false prophecy. The boy left the pavilion, the weight of his impending death pressing heavily upon him. Yet, as he walked through the moonlit palm groves, he felt no regret. He had penetrated the soul of the world. He had loved Fatima. If he died tomorrow, it would be while living out his personal legend. Suddenly, a massive rush of wind announced the arrival of a terrifying figure, a horseman dressed entirely in black, with a falcon perched upon his shoulder, reared his steed before the boy. The man drew a massive, curved sword, the blade glinting menacingly in the moonlight. Demanding to know who dared to read the flight of the hawks, the stranger lowered the tip of his sword until it touched the boy's forehead, drawing a single drop of blood. The boy did not flinch. He looked up at the terrifying horseman and stated calmly that he had merely read what the birds had shown him and that he was following his personal legend. The stranger remained completely still, his eyes boring into the boy's soul. Slowly, he sheathed his weapon. The horseman declared that he had needed to test the boy's courage, for courage was the most essential quality for understanding the language of the world. He commanded the boy to seek him out the following evening, provided he survived the coming day. As the mysterious figure rode off into the night, the boy realized, with a mixture of awe and exhaustion, that he had finally met the alchemist. The following morning, the oasis was a silent fortress. 2,000 armed men waited in the shadows of the date palms. Before noon, an army of 500 tribesmen crested the dunes, their weapons concealed within their robes. They charged the great white tent, only to find it empty. In a matter of minutes, the men of the oasis descended upon the invaders. The battle was brief and bloody. Every single invading soldier was killed, save for their commander, who was later hanged from a dead palm tree for violating the sacred neutrality of the oasis. True to his word, the elder chieftain summoned the boy, presenting him with 50 pieces of gold and offering him the prestigious position of counselor of the oasis. That night, beneath the light of the moon, the boy walked south to the solitary tent of the alchemist. Inside, there were no elaborate bubbling flasks or mystical apparatus, only a simple fire, a pile of books, and the 2 hawks the alchemist had hunted earlier. Over a meal and a cup of forbidden wine, the alchemist confirmed that the universe had conspired to bring the boy to him. He offered to guide the young Andalusian across the treacherous desert to the pyramids. The boy, clutching his newfound wealth and his love for Fatima, resisted. He argued that he had already found his treasure here in the oasis. The alchemist gently but firmly dismantled this illusion. He laid out the boy's future if he chose to stay. A few years of wealth and marital bliss, followed by the agonizing, persistent voice of his ignored personal legend. He explained that true love never impedes a man from pursuing his destiny. If it does, it is not the love that speaks the language of the world. Understanding the profound truth in the alchemist's words, the boy made his heart-wrenching decision. Before dawn, he went to Fatima's tent to bid her a final farewell. They embraced, sealing their promise. She wept, acknowledging that she was now a woman of the desert, waiting for her man to return. As the boy rode out into the dunes alongside the alchemist, his heart ached, but the older man advised him not to look back, for everything is written in the soul of the world. For days they traversed the desolate sands. The alchemist taught the boy not through complex books, but by urging him to immerse himself in the desert and to listen closely to his own heart. The boy struggled at first. His heart was agitated, fearful of suffering, and desperate to return to Fatima. The alchemist counseled him to never silence his heart, but to understand its fears and tricks. Tell your heart that the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, the alchemist instructed, and that no heart has ever suffered when it goes in search of its dreams. Gradually, the boy and his heart forged an unbreakable alliance, finding joy in every moment of the search. As they neared the region of the most intense tribal warfare, their journey took a perilous turn. They were intercepted by hundreds of armed tribesmen and brought before a ruthless military chief. Accused of espionage, their lives hung by a thread. In a stunning display of audacity, the alchemist handed over all of the boy's hard-earned gold to the chief, claiming it was a gift. He then declared that the boy was a powerful alchemist, capable of transforming himself into the wind and destroying their entire camp. The skeptical but fearful chief granted them 3 days to prove this impossible claim, promising death if they failed. The boy was paralyzed with terror. He had no idea how to become the wind. For 2 days he sat atop a high cliff staring out at the unforgiving desert, his life seemingly at its end. On the 3rd day, the chief and his commanders gathered at the base of the cliff to witness the spectacle. The boy turned to the desert, conversing with the sands about love and the interconnectedness of all things. The desert, unable to transform him, offered its sand to help the wind blow. The boy then spoke to the wind, challenging its pride and asking it to carry his voice to Fatima. The wind, furious at its inability to turn a man into itself, whipped up a massive sandstorm, a blinding simum, but confessed it could not perform the miracle. It directed the boy to speak to the sun. Looking up into the blinding light, the boy spoke to the sun of the soul of the world, of evolution and of love as the force that transforms, led into gold. But the sun, in all its cosmic wisdom, also admitted it could not grant the boy's request. It advised him to speak to the hand that wrote all. In a moment of profound, silent clarity, the boy reached through the soul of the world and touched the soul of God. He realized that the divine spark was not something external, but resided within his own soul. He understood that he, a simple shepherd boy, was capable of performing miracles. The simum blew with an unprecedented, apocalyptic fury, nearly leveling the military camp. When the blinding storm finally subsided, the boy was no longer standing on the cliff. He had materialized beside a sentinel on the far side of the encampment. The tribesmen were terrified by this display of raw, supernatural power. The military chief, humbled by the majesty of God, immediately released the travelers, providing them with an armed escort for the remainder of their journey. Their escort left them at the gates of a Coptic monastery, only a few hours' ride from the pyramids. Inside the monastery's simple kitchen, the alchemist demonstrated the masterwork. Melting lead in an iron pan, he added a microscopic sliver of the philosopher's stone. The lead transformed into a solid disc of pure, gleaming gold. The alchemist divided the disc into 4 parts, 1 for the accommodating monk, 1 for himself, and 2 for the boy, to replace the gold given to the tribal chief, and, as a precaution, for the future. With a final story about the profound, hidden significance of every life, the alchemist bid the boy farewell. Returning to the war-torn desert, the boy rode the final hours alone, his heart singing with anticipation. As he crested a towering dune under the light of the full moon, the majestic pyramids of Egypt finally rose before him, bathed in silver light. Overwhelmed with gratitude and awe, the boy fell to his knees and wept. He had traversed continents, learned the language of the world, and discovered the true meaning of love. Noticing a scarab beetle, a sacred omen in Egypt, scuttling through the sand where his tears had fallen, the boy began to dig furiously. Throughout the grueling night, he tore at the sand and rock, exhausting himself but finding absolutely nothing. Suddenly, the harsh sound of footsteps broke the silence. A group of desperate refugees, fleeing the tribal wars, descended upon him. Discovering the gold piece the alchemist had given him, they assumed he had unearthed a massive fortune. They forced him to continue digging, and when the hole yielded nothing, they brutally beat him until he was bloody and near death. In a final, desperate act of survival, the boy screamed the truth that he was digging for a treasure revealed to him in a recurring dream. The leader of the refugees, believing the boy to be a fool, ordered his men to stop the beating. Before leaving the boy bleeding in the sand, the leader scoffed, recounting his own recurring dream from 2 years prior. He sneered that he had dreamed of a ruined church in the fields of Spain, where shepherds slept with their flocks, a church with a sycamore tree growing from the ruins of the sacristy. If he dug at the roots of that tree, the dream promised, he would find a hidden treasure. But the leader mocked the idea of crossing an entire desert for a mere dream. As the refugees vanished into the night, the battered, bleeding boy slowly pulled himself up. He looked at the towering pyramids, Despite his broken body, a radiant smile spread across his face. His heart burst with an overwhelming, transcendent joy. He knew exactly where his treasure was. Dusk was beginning to blanket the Andalusian countryside by the time the young traveler finally arrived at the familiar ruins of the abandoned church. The ancient sycamore tree still stretched its heavy branches outward from the dilapidated sacristy, and as darkness fully settled, the constellations revealed themselves through the gaping holes in the collapsed roof. He stood there for a moment, letting the memories wash over him. He recalled the quiet, peaceful night he had spent in this exact spot with his flock of sheep, a night that would have remained entirely unremarkable had it not been for the recurring dream that ultimately altered the course of his existence. This time, however, he had returned not as a shepherd tending to his flock, but as an adventurer equipped with a shovel. Settling onto the soft ground, he spent a long while simply gazing up at the infinite expanse of the night sky. He retrieved a bottle of wine from his satchel, taking a slow, deliberate sip. The taste brought his thoughts back to the vast, silent desert and the profound evening he had shared with the master of alchemy, sitting under a canopy of stars, sharing both drink and wisdom. He pondered the countless paths he had walked, and the incredibly complex, unpredictable methods the divine hand had employed to guide him back to this very spot. A profound sense of gratitude filled him as he realized that had he dismissed the spiritual weight of his recurring visions, he would never have encountered the enigmatic gypsy, the wise old monarch, the desperate thief, or the alchemist. "It is a vast list of people and places," he murmured to the empty church, "but every step was mapped out in the omens, leaving no room for me to lose my way." Exhaustion eventually overtook his reflections, and he drifted into a deep sleep beneath the sycamore. When his eyes finally fluttered open, the sun was already high in the sky, casting bright beams through the ruined ceiling. He stood up, grabbed his shovel, and began to unearth the dirt directly at the roots of the massive tree. As he worked the soil, a sudden wave of playful exasperation hit him. Looking up at the open sky, he called out to the distant king of Salem. "You cunning old sorcerer," he shouted into the air. "You knew the truth all along. You even made sure to leave a piece of gold at the Coptic monastery so I would have the means to return to this very church." The monk laughed at the sight of my torn clothes and bruised body. "Could you not have spared me that brutal beating at the pyramids?" From the gentle rustling of the leaves, a soft breeze swept down, carrying with it a silent but unmistakable voice. "No," the wind seemed to whisper into his soul. "Had I revealed the location of your treasure, you never would have laid eyes upon the pyramids of Egypt. And you must admit, their beauty is unparalleled." A broad, genuine smile broke across the young man's face. The voice was right. He plunged the shovel back into the earth with renewed vigor. Barely 30 minutes had passed before the metal edge of his tool struck something hard and unyielding. Digging faster now, he spent the next hour carefully excavating his prize until an ancient wooden chest lay exposed before him. Prying the heavy lid open, his eyes widened at the sight. The chest was brimming with ancient Spanish gold coins. Nestled among the gold were precious uncut stones, magnificent golden masks adorned with vibrant white and crimson feathers, and heavy stone idols encrusted with dazzling jewels. It was the forgotten plunder of a long-past conquest, a secret hoard buried by a conquistador who had perished before he could pass the knowledge on to his heirs. Reaching into his pouch, the young man retrieved the two smooth stones, Urim and Thummim. He reflected on the fact that he had relied on their predictive power only once during that desperate morning in the African marketplace. Since then, the sheer force of his own destiny and the relentless current of the world's omens had been enough to guide his steps. Gently, he placed the black and white stones into the chest alongside the gold and jewels. They belonged there now, an integral part of his ultimate reward, and a permanent monument to the old king whom he knew he would never encounter again. He marveled at the sheer generosity of life toward those who possess the courage to relentlessly pursue their personal legends. Then, a practical thought pierced his reverie. He would need to make a journey to Tarifa to surrender 1/10 of this staggering wealth to the gypsy dream interpreter, fulfilling the oath he had sworn so long ago. Those gypsies truly possess a cunning wisdom, he mused, suspecting that their nomadic lifestyle had taught them the deep secrets of the world. As he stood there amidst his newfound fortune, the wind began to stir once more. It was the Levanter, blowing in across the strait from the shores of Africa. Yet, this time, it carried neither the dry scent of the desert sands nor the ancient threat of Moorish conquerors. Instead, the breeze wrapped around him, bringing with it the unmistakable, intoxicating fragrance of a perfume he knew intimately. The wind brushed gently against his face, carrying the soft, phantom touch of a kiss that had traveled across a continent and an ocean, arriving slowly, tenderly, to rest upon his lips. The young man's smile deepened. It was the very first time she had sent her love to him in such a manner. "I am coming, Fatima," he whispered to the wind.